Kaunas Europos kultūros sostinė 2022 programos dalis.
I don't know if surprised or shocked would be the word, but it's the experience of it. This is certainly the first time we worked in a country that was a formerly a part of the Soviet bloc. That's a big difference. It's the first time we've experienced that in our project. I think it's inescapable to have that reflected within the experience. And somebody in the characters in the plays mentions that despite the long history of Lithuania as a country, in a way it's only 30 years old, and that's very different. And I think that's been something that we felt since we've been here. We arrived in September, and that continues to we continue to feel.
I would disagree with you just in one point, and why not have some disagreement? It's
sure.
Good for viewers. In Germany, although we went to Munich, I think it's not negligible that half the country was behind that curtain. Mm-hmm. And in fact, what we examined in Germany was the rise of nationalism, and many, like the strongest peak of nationalism is on the formerly Soviet side of Germany. And so the only reason I bring it up is because I see some parallels in some of the themes that, the sort of latency of certain ideas to transmit, a lack of trust in government in general and what that does to public discourse, that affected Germany and is affecting Germany. In Lithuania, you can see that duality in a more pronounced way. The desire to sort of marry European values and to move forward, and at the same time, a very present and powerful desire to remember that we're Lithuanians before we just get washed away in a giant ocean of commercial exchanges and identityless transactions. So that is a powerful undercurrent that we see in Europe, but especially in countries that had a split during the communist period.
And it's like that capitalism, I think, in contrast to like Canada or North America, still has some kind of, holds some promise for progressive identities. So
and conservatives in Canada and
it's true.
In North America.
It's true.
Not everyone thinks like you.
Yeah, well, it's true, yes. But on the left, or on the more progressive side, there's a more, or like, I think what you would probably call like liberal side here. Capitalism can be a friend of liberalism. It's less fashionable in Canada to think that way. And I would also say like our concept of what the progressivism is more synonymous with the left in Canada. Here, the left means a very different thing, right. We've discovered. And it's synonymous with a much more dangerous period of history. And so we notice that. And we notice how that shapes and makes polarization and division very different in a country that has a history of communism. So
I'd like, since Alex decided to launch a debate, I'd like to counter what he said, because we were working in Munich. We were working in Munich, and while I do agree that part of the conversation that was happening was dealing with the rise of kind of far-right groups, specifically in the former Eastern Germany. Most of the show really was about Bavarian identity, which is a very different thing. And when I mentioned that the uniqueness of being in Lithuania, being a country that is quote-unquote 30 years old, that was a former Soviet country, also specifically that the former overlords live right next door, which is a very unique and different situation than what we went through or we experienced in Munich. So that was kind of the point I was making, not necessarily where you.
Oh, no.
it.
I just wanted to highlight that.
The word disagree.
Gender and how gender,
Yeah.
the particular relationships between men and women in Lithuanian society. We've noticed all sorts of things about that here, and how power and feminism and and the kind of like differences in generational experience that kind of struggle for a baseline for a rights, power, and equality for women is still, seems like to us, still a pretty active struggle here. And so I think the dinners that took place kind of reflect a little bit that particular struggle. What else?
Well, I mean, yeah, I would drill into that a little
Yeah,
bit. The gender thing actually was surprisingly apparent, because even women who shared with us discomfort about gender issues would not do it when other Lithuanian men were around. Mm-hmm. We would have to speak to them separately to address some actually outrageous stories and things that are not little transgressions, but
right.
more substantial ones.
The generational conflict, exists for sure. That's something we've picked up on, and it relates to gender as well, due to, like say a younger generation would maybe have more inclusive, progressive views towards feminism and that kind of thing. And we have noticed that divide, the people who grew up prior to 1991 and the people who grew up after it, who don't necessarily remember the changeover. So yeah, there's this kind of, it's the generational divide that goes with values as well, and there seems to be that there's a struggle going on as to which direction this country is going to go into. Istanbul Convention, I found it very fascinating that you had your first ever gay pride march this year in September, if I'm correct.
In Kauno.
In Kauno.
Yes,
Yeah, and it's
in
important
Kauno.
to say Kauno
Yes.
is more conservative.
Sure, in Kauno. But that's still surprising
City.
to me. And the fact that it was shut down and then eventually allowed to happen, and that some of the remarks that your mayor made when it was allowed to happen, which were clearly homophobic, that's an issue here. That's something that people are struggling with, and so it's like we're tracking which direction this country, or this city anyway, in this case, is going to go.
I would add also, the interesting relationship to religion in countries that
Right.
were in the Soviet bloc, because, religion was not permitted. It was, an atheistic society, or what would I say, regime. And so to have protected religious values through that terrible period also fortified them once freedom was achieved. And so if, some religious values also are conservative in nature, you end up dealing with nationalism and religion being intimately linked together, because they're both part of this emancipation from some other force telling you how to be. And so there are many ways to believe in God, but there are also very traditional ways, and the traditional ways struggle with things like homosexuality, women having a different sort of station in society. So I think it's one of the motors in this conversation that we explore.
Also, there's things that are not part of our observation here, which are fascinating. For example, I think every one of our other assemblies deals with race and immigration. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's certainly that's an aspect of this piece, but there's a more, at least here in our dinners, there's cultural and cultural homogeneity amongst the group. And I think many of our other assemblies are grappling with a kind of the consequences of like a lot of immigration and a history of racism, and have bodies on stage which are not all white. So that's not the case here, and so that's.
If I remember correctly, the demographics of the country are that it's 97% white.
Yeah.
Which is certainly not the case in Canada or the United States, countries that are built on immigration, that have a native population. And in Germany, that has a lot more, I guess, immigration or diversity of people than we've seen here.
And so you also see this phenomenon of Lithuania seeing Europe over there and the consequences on Europe, and seeing its future as either being, Kaunas, capital of culture, European cities, like the European route and the view of what that might look like, versus staying more its own thing and staying more separate from Europe. That comes up as well.